Hi folks, Dave Schmidt here. It's the afternoon of January 23rd as I'm doing this recording today. And again, this is the prelude for the program tomorrow night. I want to say thank you to all of you for your patience because I haven't been on the radio program for the last few weeks. A couple of those was the holiday season, and then basically my sources had asked me to go quiet. There's a lot of really big stuff that's going on in the background, but here's what I want to do tonight. This video here is going to be one of those that's going to be a little bit longer. It's going to basically be a full, complete review again. This is one of those videos that you'll be able to share with others if you want to truly understand what's going on here in the whole currency exchange issue. I started in this process, about 4.5 years ago. Even is about, about 4 years ago that I started doing my workshops and bringing this information to you on a more personal basis that is there as well. Like a lot of you, you had probably purchased these currencies some years ago because you had heard that from a friend or somebody, and you really wondered what was it that was really going on. When I started in this process about 4.5 years ago, like you, I asked a lot of questions. I had stayed out of it for a long time because it just didn't seem to be realistic until somebody gave me an explanation of what was happening with the oil credits in Iraq. When they said that, I thought, okay, that could possibly be realistic, and I'm willing to kind of step into it to see what's going on. Because see, what I've learned from my background in both being in politics for 12 years and in banking and finance, it's always a question of follow the money. Because you see, when we talk about these currency exchanges, somebody somewhere has to pay for it. Somebody has to come up with this money. So not only, number one, do you follow the money, the second question I always ask is, how much is it going to cost? Who has that kind of money? First of all, who's going to pay for it? Number two, where did they get that kind of money? Where did they come up with the sources of that kind of money? And number three, who's the opposition to this and who's going to try to stop it? Because when you're looking at this type of an issue that this is this big, you're always going to have an issue. So whenever you are listening to anybody or reading anything on any of the blog sites or anything that anybody else is putting out, ask yourself those three questions. Number one, who's got the money? Who is it that's actually paying? Number two, where did they get the money and how much is it going to cost? And number three, how strong is the opposition to this happening? And I've been asking those questions for the whole complete 4 years that I've been doing these programs. And in the process, I've been led down some pretty deep rabbit holes. And I absolutely believe in this process, I've come to the point where I understand the funding sources for all of this. I've said before, there are three primary funding sources. Now, there's secondary sources in this, and yes, there are secondary groups that do have that, but all of them come from one of these three primary sources. The first one are the elders and the dragon families that you've heard so much about that are basically located throughout various places in Asia. I go into full, complete detail in the workshops about how these elders and dragon families came up with all this gold and all this money that they have and these very large trusts, these largest trusts in the world that they have. One of them specifically says we can trace our family genealogy and history back thousands of years. This is a wealth of basically gold and other valuable instruments they've been collecting for thousands of years. Those are the elders and the dragon families. Secondly, are basically the government entities. And yes, there are some government entities that operate in this in a very quiet, what you call shadow world manner. And they have been able to take large sums of money, and they've been on what are called these off-market trading platforms. And these are the type of off-market trading platforms where they can double their money about every 4 to 6 months. And they've been doing this now for over 25 years. And they have accumulated trillions of dollars to do that. The third group are those that are predominantly headquartered in London, but they also have various other locations in Hong Kong and here in the United States, predominantly in Reno. And this third group, they are basically an independent, what I call very powerful control group, and they acquired their funds also in these off-market trading platforms. Now, it's important, though, to understand that in all of these groups, there are what I would call both black hats and white hats. In the elder groups, it's not just all white hats. Let me talk a little bit about the elders and the dragon families. I've made 4 trips to Hong Kong. I've met with them personally 3 times. I'm familiar also with what my sources tell me is the top individual. They explain the structure of what are called these dragon family clans. There are multiple clans, and within those clans there are 126 different dragon families per se. Not all of them are on the same page, and not all of them are white hats. Some of them are just plain flat out black hats that are funding and controlling cabal entities. In this primary top group, you have 9 senior elders. Underneath those elders, each of those 9 have 9 underneath them, an additional 9, and it layers all the way down. So yes, there is one very top group, and that one very top group are white hats, but what you have underneath them are subgroups of elders, and they don't always operate on the same page, and because they come from different families, and because they're kind of like distant cousins, they can be diametrically opposed to each other. These subgroups of these families, dragon families, and grandfathers or elders, or whatever you want to call them, and yes, over decades and decades, they have been able to accumulate some of their own very large sources of money. And in that, as I said, you have some of the elders in dragon family clans that are the white hats and are benevolent, and you have some that are directly aligned, or they are the funding sources of some of these very deep, powerful black hat cabal groups. So it's always important to know what is your funding source, because you may not know that you are involved in a currency exchange that is coming from basically black hat cabal oriented sources, and at the end of the day, that's about power and control. That's the way these structures work, and that's why you can hear all kinds of different reports about the Chinese elders or the grandfathers or the grandfather. Just know that all of these different families can have their own elders and their own grandfathers. So unless you can trace that specific source, there is no guarantee that those are the guys that are at the top calling the shots. Now, for about the last year, I have been in touch with the team that I absolutely believe are in touch with what is called the top superior red dragon. I have absolutely no reason to not believe that. I have met with them personally multiple times. There is one gentleman that I refer to as Mr. T. He is the son of what is called the true red dragon and the true elder. He is the gentleman that is the primary signer on the single largest trust in the world. I've met with him personally. I've been right beside him. We have talked face to face, and he told me that he has had personal meetings with the CEO of HSBC Bank in Hong Kong, which is one of the largest banks in the world, and that CEO told Mr. T, "You have more money in our bank than anybody in the world." Now, Mr. T and his group, they are the ones that have told me that they will be funding basically all the people that are on our list here in the Sedona Connection for funding of projects, and also some of the personal finances that will come your way as well. But my understanding so far is how they have communicated me, they have not released any funds to anybody. So regardless of what you hear, if you're hearing reports out there that there are other dragon family clans or elders or grandfathers that have released money, it may be possible. But those are going to be your subgroups, the lower groups. These are not the top group. When they say that they operate the largest trust in the world, they do. It is the single largest source of money on this planet. And they say they can trace these funds, I should say they can trace these resources back close to 8,000 years. And it's been an accumulation of that time over that period of time. Now, I do go into much more details in the workshops about that, so that's where I can give the full complete picture for what is there. I wish I could say more, but I'm somewhat limited about what I can say here on the internet. Why? Because when you put something out on the internet and it's recorded, once it's out there, you totally lose control of it. People can take it, manipulate it, shift it, and change it. Believe it or not, there is software and technology that is out there that can take this video and then can record my voice as an audio recording, and then take that and manipulate this part of the video to make it say whatever it is they want it to say. They can take my voice and then type up, in script, and then use the Audible applications to what they typed up and take my voice and make it sound like I'm actually saying it, and then put it on here and make it look like I'm actually saying it. That technology is available. And folks, if you think they won't do that, well, I'm sorry. I am familiar with it, and I know, and I've seen others who have tried to do it at various times. So that's why I have to be very careful about what I can say here on the internet, whether it's on video or it's on the radio program, because at some point in time, if we become a challenge or a threat to the opposition to these funds coming forward, believe me, they will do whatever it is that they need to do to protect themselves and stay in power and control. That's the first primary source of the money. Now I want to talk about the second primary source. These are government contracts, but this is a shadow government operation. It's a very quiet government operation, but they understand and know what they're doing. And yes, it operates underneath the auspices of some of these three-letter agencies. Now, they do have other subcontractors that are running the program, so it can't be directly traced back to them, but they are the ones that are overseeing it. They have had over 25 years of operating on these off-market trading platforms to develop these funds. And there's a reason why they've been accumulating this money. Because they knew down inside there was going to come a day, because of the massive indebtedness and fiat currency printing taking place here in the United States, that basically not only the United States, but most of the Western world was going to run into being an extremely indebted proposition. Right now, we live in a world that all of the G7 countries are in debt beyond their ability to recover. Now, what does that mean? That means the end result of that can only be one of two things. Number one, we head into massive hyperinflation, or number two, we go into a full, complete bankruptcy and there's no money available. Because at some point in time, if they're going to continue to pay their bills and they're going to continue to be able to accumulate more debt, one of those two scenarios are going to be the outcome. And there are now a lot of professional financial experts that are appearing on a lot of the different financial TV programs, such as CNBC, Fox Business News, Bloomberg Business Report, and they're saying we've got a financial collapse coming our way. There were white hats within the government that knew that, and that's why they've been accumulating this money to be able to somewhat offset this huge potential global financial collapse that's coming our way. This third source. These are very, very powerful, high elite, what we call cabal organizations and individuals. And yes, they had access to these off-market trading platforms as well. And yes, they have been accumulating large sums, trillions of dollars, that they are also going to release in currency bond exchanges. But here's something that's extremely important to know. When you have those type of people that are addicted to power and control, don't think that they're just going to give the money away to be nice guys. They're going to give the money away to stay in power and control, to keep their power and control. And they will set up a system of the funds being released to make sure that they can control you to a certain degree. Yes, there will be some personal financial benefit that you're going to come out of that, but there's also a secondary reason. They have certain goals about what they want to do to keep their power and control. And that's to finance different types of operations that are going on around the world. But instead of allowing that to all be traced back to one primary source, by spreading it out to thousands and thousands of people, and then setting up contracts of how those project monies are going to be spent, they still get to accomplish their same goals, but yet they aren't the ones that are totally financing it. They're basically, it's coming from all these multiple sources as though it is donations and gifts to carry this forward. Believe me, those groups, it's called power and control. So now where am I? I currently have 6 different currency exchange contracts, and I have them in all 3 of those groups. And that's why I'm in touch with them. I'm in touch with the people that are right at the very top of the Dragon family clans. When it comes to the government programs, I am in personal touch with the bank that works directly for them and provides their banking services. I am their largest currency client. And it's because of monies that I have had come in from other outside sources where I have operated as a broker myself. And I have a personal friendship with the largest currency broker in the world that is based out of Reno. I have multiple sources in Reno, multiple people that I work with there. But that's the level that I'm coming at. And when I come back to those three primary questions, I know the sources of who all those people are that have that money. I know how they got their money to making sure that it's very legitimate that it's funds, and I know who the opposition is. So I always say ask those questions, because if you don't ask those questions, you don't really know what's going on. I understand and I know that sometimes it can appear to be kind of confusing. Sometimes it can appear to be like, well, what's really going on? What is it that you can trust? What is it that you can't trust? What's really taking place out there? Ask those three questions. Now, recently, there's been some new reports that are coming out that have been very good from some different sources. Some of it's been right on, some of it's been a little bit off, but there's a very common source that a lot of us are familiar with, and his name is Ben Fulford. I have Ben Fulford's phone number, I should say his Skype contact. I can call up and talk with Ben if I want to, and if I need to. We choose not to because our conversations are recorded, so we choose not to communicate unless it's absolutely necessary. Ben has some very good contacts, and some of his stuff is very good. Some of his stuff has been proven to be off base. It's not that Ben is not a dishonest person. He operates as a reporter, so he reports what is being told to him. But if you followed him for a long enough period of time, you realize, well, some of his stuff has been off. There's a second person that I'm starting to follow that I absolutely love, and I have a lot of appreciation for this guy, and many of you are familiar with him, and his name is Cliff High. Cliff fits into what I call the genius category. If you have spent any amount of time listening to his YouTube video presentations, you realize this man is a genius. This man is extremely knowledgeable on multiple sources of subjects. He understands the global economy. He knows what's going on. Cliff, and he went into quite detail in this in one of his presentations, is saying, we here in the United States are heading for hyperinflation. There's a lot of other very good financial experts that are saying that as well. Why? Well, when we go back to after the financial collapse 10 years ago in 2008, and after that, the Federal Reserve did what was called quantitative easing. And in quantitative easings, they were basically printing up trillions of dollars of fiat money with nothing backing it and putting it out into circulation. That's what they were doing. Normally, that creates hyperinflation. But what has held it back and has stopped it is because what has been called the petrodollar. Since the late 1970s, there's been an agreement all around the world that all oil that was transacted, being bought and sold from different countries and different producers, was always transacted in U.S. dollars. All the oil in the world being transacted in U.S. dollars, the petrodollar system, is what kept us from moving into this hyperinflation scenario. In spite of all of this fiat currency, quantitative currency being printed up in the trillions of dollars. Well, the petrodollar is over. It's stopped. It's no longer operating. Countries are no longer required to transact their oil contracts in U.S. dollars. What most people don't know is that Russia is the largest oil producer in the world. It's not Saudi Arabia. Russia produces and sells lots of oil. And they will sell the oils to the majority of the European countries and as well as China. They are China's largest oil producer. And it used to be when China wanted to buy oil from Russia under the petrodollar system, they had to buy it in U.S. dollars, which means China had to accumulate U.S. dollars to buy it. Well, they're not doing that anymore. They're purchasing it directly with their own currency. Their own yuan currency is what they're doing. And even Russia is now using rubles in transactions as well with some of the other countries throughout Europe. Because the petrodollar system has ended, we are now in a very ripe position to move into the hyperinflation. And that's one of the reasons why I bring you information about the cryptocurrencies. Cliff High is a cryptocurrency expert as well. He has been making projections over the last 2 and 3 years that have been absolutely right on. Yes, the cryptocurrencies are very vulnerable, which means they're very volatile and they can go through huge movements. But also, it is a system that the real experts are saying, it's here to stay. It is not going to go away. Now, I'm not going to take a lot of time in this video to go into the cryptocurrency issue, other than the fact that you are familiar that I've had a gentleman on my program for a number of times, and his name is Jason. Jason used to be a professional market trader. We have developed very good professional and personal friendships with each other, and Jason is now becoming a professional in the cryptocurrency market scenario. He has developed his own business. He now has over 15,000 names on his business list. And recently we had a special seminar in Phoenix where Jason was there. Jason is going to come out with some new information. Now, he's developing a new website. As soon as that is available and ready, I am going to send out a special newsletter so that you can contact him if you wish to be involved in his situation with the training scenarios that he has on the cryptocurrencies. What I can say, he is absolutely top of the line professional, and I've been around this stuff long enough to be able to make that as a qualitative statement. Why am I saying this? Because not only is Jason saying it, not only is Cliff High saying it, and many others are saying it. If you take your resources, what is called your disposable or excess resources, and allow them to sit in the cryptocurrency accounts, they will basically inflate much faster than the problem of the hyperinflation. It's going to allow you to stay ahead of the hyperinflationary curve. And what Cliff says, the more we move into the hyperinflation, the more money that will be poured into the cryptocurrencies, because there are financial experts will see that that is a safe place to be able to put their money. There's another reason why I support the cryptocurrencies. Because see, right now, if you and I are to make a financial transaction, whether it's you paying for my workshops that you want to attend, or if it's buying or purchasing money or wanting to send money, whatever it is, whatever type of a financial transaction that you make, we are all using the existing Federal Reserve central banking controlled system. The banks always operate as a middleman in all of our financial transactions. Whether you write a check, whether you give currency because the currency comes through the bank, or whether you do a money wire, you have to send it through a bank to someone else. That means they control the money system. They control the world's money supply. And you better believe there's a lot of corruption at the very top that makes them become very powerful and very wealthy and been able to control the ebb and the flow of the world's monetary system. What's happening in the cryptocurrency system, though, is we bypass the middleman. You can send funds to me directly as cryptocurrencies and there's no bank involved in the transaction, or vice versa. Down the road, I may very well allow you to pay me in cryptocurrencies for the workshops. It takes I want to see basically the cryptocurrencies get to the point where they're not so volatile before I do that. And I would have to set up a specific type of a software system to be able to do that as well. But that is going to expand, folks, and that's why I encourage you, if you really want to stay on top of your financial resources, to understand the cryptocurrency systems. Now, what's happening in the currency exchanges, and why is this really happening? Well, you have to go all the way back to what was called the original Bretton Woods Agreement right around the time of World War II. This was an agreement where multiple countries had come together, and because of basically the financial situation that was taking place in the world, that there were multiple countries that they wanted to create what was called an equity financial system across the board. They wanted to basically eliminate the extremely powerful have countries from the have-nots. Because see, wars quite often are always at the end of it, at the very underneath foundation of it, it's all about money and power and control of finances. And the powerful are basically able to control the weaker ones. The original Bretton Woods Agreement was basically an attempt to equalize that. During that time, it was out of that that they established the United Nations, the Bank of International Settlements, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank. Those institutions were established to be able to administrate and to move all of these funds around the world. Well, what happened is the cabal came in using their power and control and grabbed control of all their systems and didn't let that happen. But here's another illustration that a lot of people don't know. What one of the outcomes of that. You look at World War II, and both Germany and Japan, their infrastructure and their countries were just absolutely devastated. How was it that both of those countries were able to recover and rebuild the bombed out buildings and depleted infrastructure on such a rapid basis? That is not normal internal economic recovery. What happened is that these countries that had met over the Bretton Woods Agreement, that's when they started and implemented these off-market trading platforms, and they used those funds to basically infuse money into those two countries to be on a very rapid recovery. And as we look at both of those countries, basically what was the mid-40s and when that started, within 25 to 30 years they both had recovered very well. That's not normal economic development recovery. That was the original Bretton Woods Agreement. It fell apart. Then with President Kennedy in the early 1960s, he had an agreement with President Sukarno of Indonesia where a lot of this gold of the Dragon family's gold was being held, and there were trillions of dollars that was there. They had come to an agreement to implement the original intention of the Bretton Woods Agreement. That was called the Green-Hilton Memorial Agreement. And you can see the document. It's out there on the internet where both Kennedy and Sukarno and others had signed it. That intention, spread the wealth, spread these trillions of dollars around the world, put it into infrastructure development of the lesser countries, the third world countries. Well, Kennedy signed the Green-Hilton Memorial Agreement, and 9 days later he was dead. A lot of people will tell you that was one of the foundational reasons for his assassination. Because if that agreement had been implemented, it would have ended what is our Federal Reserve banking system. And the Federal Reserve is the tool that these elite cabal uses to control the world's money supply. They would have ended the Federal Reserve, and it would have ended their power and control of manipulating and controlling the world's money supply. Well, the sources of these funds, which is predominantly these dragon families, they realized that both of those were failures. They realized they couldn't trust basically the countries because there was way too much corruption at the top. They couldn't trust the existing elite banking system because there was way too much corruption at the top. But they have always wanted to basically to still implement the original intention of the Bretton Woods Agreement. And they've started a process, and they've been working on this now for decades, to basically get to cleaning up the elite banking system, the elite controllers, to be able to move this money, to be able to spread it out around the world. But this time they're doing something different. Instead of taking the money and starting from the top up and coming through the elites and the governments where there's a lot of corruption, they're doing just the opposite. They're starting from the bottom with everyday people like you and me. Yes, there are a lot of whales that are involved in this. Yes, there are a lot of very wealthy people. But people, common everyday people like you and I, are getting to participate in this. And they're starting it from there. And they're coming from the bottom up instead of from the top down. It was in a recent conversation that I had with one of my primary money sources. And we were estimating how many people are out there in these private exchanges. And we had come to a conclusion. There's somewhere between 180 and 200,000 people that are going to be funded in the private exchanges. And again, the intention of this is to move these funds so that they get spread all around the world. It offsets the hyperinflation and the potential economic chaos that's coming in our way with the G7 countries. And then it also puts money into numbers of lower economic development countries, improving their infrastructure and the lifestyles for most of those people. I've talked about in the past that there's also another reason that they're doing this. As technology has increased and you get people in these more economic depleted countries, even though they don't have a lot of money for their own living conditions, because see, what most people don't know is about half of the world's population, over 3.5 billion people on this planet, live on less than $10 a day. That's tough. When you're living on $10 a day, you are basically in a situation where you're just in a survival mode. All of your time, all of your energy is at working just to get enough money just to survive, to have food and have a roof over your head, even if you have that. That is where over half of the world's population lives. But what's happening, and I saw this and I experienced this firsthand when I was in Thailand about 1.5 years ago, and I saw a lot of the really deep poverty areas in that country. Even though you have a lot of these people, now maybe they have a little bit more than $10 a day, but still what you have is the vast majority of these families now have at least one smartphone in the family. And what they're able to do, they're able to realize that they're living in depleted, basically very hard economic conditions, and they're now getting to see what's happening in the rest of the world. It doesn't take much when they have those types of cell phones and smartphones to organize literally millions and millions of people into basically what is called a counter-revolution of the have-nots revolting against the haves. And the elite know that. They know that if they don't start putting money into these stronger, let me rephrase it, the weaker developed countries, these people are about ready to go through a revolt and a revolution. And they're going to realize they're going to have to stop that. So that's a secondary reason why these funds are being released. Basically implementing the original intentions of the Bretton Woods Agreement. Number 2, starting from the bottom up and spreading these resources in project funding all around the world. And number 3, in holding off a potential revolution. That's the purpose for these currency exchanges. Now, there's a lot of talk on the different blog sites about the 800 numbers in the system that is there. What I'm going to say is coming from my sources. All of these 3 primary sources, where all of the primary funds come from, none of them are telling me that they're funding the 800 number system. We cannot find anybody anywhere that's going to fund that system. They basically are saying if you want to be a part of this, you have to be a part of a private exchange, a private contract. Don't expect that you're going to be able to just basically dial up an 800 number, get an appointment, walk into a processing center or a bank, and walk out a millionaire. At the end of the day, somebody has to fund it. Now, there are different blog writers that have been talking about this, but for close to 4 years I've been saying, hey guys, when are you going to address the question of where your money's coming from? Not one of them has ever been able to adequately address that question of knowing who has the money, who's going to pay for it, where they got the money, and how they're going to overcome the opposition to that. Not one in over 4 years that I've been doing this. Now, recently, there's been some new developments, and there's been a specific individual that is becoming what I call, the new star on the blog sites. I know who this individual is. I know this individual's full name. I know where that individual used to live. I know where that individual now lives. And I know the team that individual used to be a part of. I'm not here to go into super deep criticism, but all I can tell you is that my sources, where this individual was a part of that team, what they said was that they came into a very deep disagreement. They got into some pretty deep arguments. And that individual chose to leave the team. There was, yes, once a time that an individual had access codes to some of these very, very large funds and trust accounts. And I'm going to tell it to you as my sources tell me. And this is not just one. It's all of the people that are on that team. They said when this individual chose to leave the team, they basically deleted the access codes that this individual has. This individual thinks their access codes still work, and they will tell you, no, they don't. because they've already been in contact with the banks. They know it. I'm not going to say anything more. All I can say is that if you do your homework, you do your research, you follow some of the postings that have been made, you can make up your own mind. But here's what I can say. Do you really think a group and a team that has access to the single largest trust in the world, that is more money than anywhere else in the world, do you really think they are going to allow one person to have uncontrolled access to those funds, to be able to release them when and however they want? Folks, that's crazy. That is absolutely crazy to think that they would do that. Of course, when you have those funds that are that large and there's that much opposition to it coming from very deep cabal, they are going to make sure that it takes a team effort to be able to release and move any of those funds. And so will the governments. Why? Because if any one individual had access to that type of money, they could literally take over the world. What different people will say is, well, the banking system won't allow the money to be moved. Believe me, if the banking system knew that that individual truly had access to those funds, they would open it up and they would take control of it themselves, and they would allow them to have so much and they would use the rest for power and control. When you talk about that kind of money, it's always about the addiction to power and control. That's all I'm going to say. But I want to be very clear on that, because I had the opportunity in the recent year to actually be introduced face-to-face with this individual. It kind of fell apart, but I know the team that individual had come from, and I'm not going to say anything more than about that, okay? I'm saying that because, folks, follow the money, follow the money, follow the money. Ask those 3 questions. Who has that kind of money? Why would they have it? Use common sense around it. Number 2, where did they get it? Where did that kind of money come from? How did they get access to it? And number 3, are they able to overcome the opposition? Because you better believe there's very strong opposition to that. So that's most of what I want to talk about tonight. This is a good recap of what's going on out there. And yes, folks, I absolutely believe this is for real. I am aware of the money. I've seen money in these bank accounts. I've talked with the people who basically have access to them. Now, why is it not happening? Because it's what I have said, and it's also what this other individual said. There are still some very, very powerful bankers at the very top that need to be, and I use the term, neutered. They need to be brought into a position where they don't have the power and control to stop it or to influence it anymore. And that's what's taking time. And my resources say we could see this shift and change take place anywhere from 2 weeks, even all the way up to possibly the end of the year. The real people in the real know that do know the answer to that question, they don't talk. That's at pay grades way above all of us. But what we can say, it's for real. Now, I also want to express one more thing about attending my workshops. I've been doing this now for almost 4 years. I've done over 65 workshops. I've had over 5,000 people attend these workshops. Many of them come repetitive times. So for those that want to be the critics, you're not criticizing me, you're criticizing the 5,000 people that have attended, and many of them, how they come multiple times. And why do they keep repeating it? Because I have had scores, if not hundreds of people tell me it's one of the best things they've ever been to in their lives. I give you a full, complete picture about how we got into the world condition of what is called financial slavery that we're in, where this money comes from, who has it, how they got it, what their intention is, and then how we get to responsibly handle it and deal with it with the responsibility that's coming to us. I've had literally scores and scores of people just say, Dave, every time your workshops, they continue to get better. And yes, folks, when it comes time, and I've said this before, when it comes time to implement the currency exchanges, I have over 10,000 people on my list. And what my resources are telling me, that's going to stretch out over a number of months. That means if it's going to take 2, 4, 5 months to process everybody, I've got to start somewhere. Who's going to be at the front of the line? And what I've said, I will start with the people that have attended my workshops. And I will start with the most recent one and work my way back. All you have to do is have attended one, and you're already, when I say over 5,000 people, there's a lot of those people that have fallen away, that they're not there. But if you just attend one, you're going to be in the top 20 to 25% at the very beginning of the list, even if you attended one 4 years ago. Okay? That's why I do, but I love what I do at these workshops. The people say that's the same thing. They absolutely love coming there. I make myself totally available for you. I can give a lot more in-depth information there that I can't give here on the internet. And there's also something about the dynamic of literally, 80 to 100 people coming together for a full, complete day, spending time with each other, learning with each other, and becoming acquainted with each other. That's the value and the benefit of it. Having said that, Saturday in Hawaii, I got a workshop in Hawaii on Saturday. 2 weeks after that, I'm going to be in Denver. There's still lots of room that is there. And folks, I have always said, if you want to come, there's the ability for you to come. Yes, I do charge a rate. All that information is on my website, but I also have a scholarship rate that is available for those of you that are financially tight. If you want to be there, I want you to be there. But yet, folks, I do need to cover my expenses. It's not cheap to put one of these on. By the time I rent the room, pay for my airfare, my hotel expenses, all the other expenses involved with it, and also, yes, this is how I basically receive an income to basically make my living, so I can continue to do this for you. So, but people are free. You can choose to come, you can choose not to come. It's totally your choice. But yet, the vast majority of the people say they absolutely love it. So, this coming Saturday is Hawaii. 2 weeks after that, I'm in Denver. 2 weeks after that, the Down Underland, Australia. Going to Australia for my very first time. 3 weeks after that, I'm in Toronto. And then I followed up with Sedona, Oakland, going back to Amsterdam, and then Cleveland. All of those dates are posted on my website, so you can go there if you would like to be able to attend one of the upcoming and future workshops. So, with that, I want to say thank you very much. Again, it was a pleasure to be here with you. It was a pleasure to be able to do this more extensive, updated video. I would love to see you on the program tomorrow night. Okay, bye-bye.